So at the centre, we've got a few people largely working together in teams regarding COVID research. We've got a few kind of papers on the go together. So the first thing that we've actually preprint released as a scientific paper is looking at the recent emergency approved drug Remdesivir for COVID-19, which is, as I say, emergency approved, not properly FDA approved for medical use. But what we look at the center is maturity of the underlying science, as well as the contribution that the public have made to that science through funding, through the NIH effectively. And so what our paper did, it's publicly available so people can go read this, is looked at the amount of publications that have been released on two core aspects underlying the Remdesivir drug, nucleoside analogues and RDRP, which is an enzyme. And we found that there are roughly around 6,500 papers that mention NIH, and that effectively added up to around about $6.5 billion public dollars that have been invested in the underlying science that has kind of made that drug possible effectively. Yes, Gilead, the maker, have had to invest a lot of money themselves in taking it to clinical trials, developing it, manufacturing it, marketing it. But there is a lot of public value and public funding that underlies all this. And it joins the argument of how much should the public be paying for this medication? Should it be available free of charge? Should it be highly subsidized? And this is beyond what we can do at the center. It's policy within government, within Gilead themselves, who need to make these decisions based upon this kind of data, funding data, who paid for the research, who didn't pay for the research. Aside from that, obviously with COVID-19, it's a big health dilemma, a virus, and our best way to kind of stop a pandemic is to make vaccines. We don't make vaccines at the center, but we've been looking at the underlying technology in a very similar fashion, looking at the targets of vaccines. So vaccines typically tend to take pieces of the virus or make synthetic versions or copycats of the virus and train the body's immune system. And so what we've been doing, we've got a bit of an expert on campus, and we've been looking at all these different types of technologies, be they very old, dating back to the 19th century, to very modern technologies today that you will have heard about through the news. And we've been looking, well, so these old ones have made vaccines in the past. We know that they work. We know that that's a plausible way that we might get this first vaccine that we need. But we're also looking at whether these newer technologies that use a bit more sophisticated things like genetics, viral vectors, for instance, whether they're truly ready based upon the modeling system that we have, this kind of maturation model, whether there's enough basic science funded by the NIH and funded by other means, private philanthropists, whether basically, are they ready? Do we think they're ready to save the day with a viable vaccine? Similar to what we've done with vaccines, we're also working on, vaccines are the holy grail to give us this kind of built-in immunity if we get exposed to the virus. But of course, we need things like Remdesivir as treatments to treat the symptoms, to treat allergic reactions or immune reaction responses, and to help people recover. And so what we've also been doing on the side, as I say, there's been teams of us working together, is we're actually looking at drug targets as well, so proteins within the body, different mechanisms that might help alleviate some of the effects of COVID-19. Not just stop us getting an infection, but how do we care for people who do end up with it? And so we're also working on a paper, again, looking at funding and looking at maturity of the underlying basic research as well, hoping we can kind of at least guide people in some way to understanding what might be a good target to invest some research money into. It might be nice to turn attention to kind of bring some of this kind of public related research and the teaching aspect that I'm involved with to actually kind of bring it together and maybe get involved outside of the university or along with the university to educate not just the students, but adults on the outside world, or perhaps as an extracurricular activity to allow people who don't necessarily take human biology to take a snippet course into what we're looking at, what we're thinking about from our kind of scientifically trained background, what we're analyzing, what we're thinking, why we believe what the scientists are reporting to us, why we trust them, and why we don't trust certain things as well. Just to try to really help kind of quash this quite heated debate at times that you see through the media.